On Saturday evening, I announced a new policy with regard to ICAC operations. I did so in the following terms. All concerned may take it that as from now, the ICAC will not normally act on complaints or evidence relating to offences committed before 1st January 1977, except in relation to persons who have already been interviewed, persons against whom warrants have been issued, and persons now outside Hong Kong. I accept persons who have already been interviewed because I do not think that anyone would accept that law enforcement operations, whether by the police or by the ICAC, should be halted by extra legal action. I say will not normally act because occasionally an offence may come to light which is so heinous that it would be unthinkable not to act, and the public would not tolerate failure to act. But in any such case, I will be consulted first. This, of course, applied to the members of all public services and to the public, and not just to the police force. Our object has always been to cleanse the public service and to continue prosecutions for past offences until acceptable standards had been achieved. We had never envisaged prosecuting everybody who had ever committed any offence. In view of the great improvement in the standards of honesty achieved, particularly over the last 2 years, I had expected before long to take a step of the sort announced last Saturday. This would make it possible to concentrate on maintaining standards for the future rather than to continue to impress the need for honesty by prosecuting people for offences committed in the past, and thus turn over a new leaf in the history of the public services. However, in the circumstances that had arisen, I judged that this relief should be granted immediately. Apart from these exceptions, it has removed all cause for fear from all who keep straight. The exceptions were deliberately intended to be very small. One was, and I quote, persons who had already been interviewed. This does not mean anybody to whom an ICAC officer has spoken at any time. It means only persons who have been interviewed by an ICAC officer, whether or not following arrest, and to whom during that interview allegations had been made that they had committed an offence. The number of such people is small, probably not more than 200 within a force of 20,000. Another exception was an offence committed before this year which came to light and was so heinous that it would be unthinkable not to act. To ensure that in no circumstances would this exception be used to undermine my general intention, I stated that if there was such a case, it would have to be referred to me, and this made clear that I expected the number of cases to be negligible, and in fact none is known at this moment. Other exceptions related to the obvious cases of persons for whom warrants have been issued or persons now outside Hong Kong. Although there was nothing in this statement that would inhibit ICAC from ensuring that the improvement achieved will be maintained, or that suggested that our determination to maintain a clean public service was abandoned or diminished, I think its timing and its content came as a shock to the public. Although the reasons for it have been sympathetically understood, many were worried that it had been made at all or that it went too far. But certainly no one has suggested that it should have gone further. Quite the contrary. My statement has been under consideration by the different associations of the police force. Honourable members and the public will be concerned to learn that informally it was suggested that it did not go far enough, that pressure should be maintained on the administration by demonstrations and progressive refusal of law enforcement until all current interviews, charges and court proceedings now in course were dropped. I have no doubt that these ideas were propagated by the less than 1% who, under the exceptions I have mentioned, remain in fear of prosecution. And insofar as they are supported by others, it is because of a mistaken sense of temporary euphoria or solidarity. I assure them it is time, very soberly, to consider their position. It is for the police to answer to lawful authority and to enforce it, not to answer to a small, self-interested group. The idea that pressure can achieve further concessions of this sort would result from a complete misconception of the mood of the government and the community. It would also ignore the true interests of at least 99% of the police force itself. Needless to say, it totally ignores the true interests of Hong Kong, where the enforcement of law and order and the achievement of acceptable standards of honesty have made such strides in recent years. Concessions to such demands under pressure would invite pressure on other issues. Next, it would be the suppression of ICAC itself, possibly to have persons in prison released, and so on, until we had a situation in which the law was being administered in the interests of the corrupt. I know this is not what most of the force and their families want, but this is where they would be led if the government were to give any further ground. To do so would yield to anarchy, and to anarchy there can be no concession. I am confident in this. I am speaking for the entire community, young and old, rich and poor. I hope that wiser counsels will now prevail, but it is as well that all should realize now, before irrevocable action is taken, that we cannot accept that policemen who do not accept lawful authority, or who support others in not doing so, or continue to dominate lawful authority by means of pressures, should remain in the force and be paid by the public. In present circumstances, powers available are too slow and ponderous. Honourable members will therefore be invited this afternoon to amend the police force ordinance to grant powers of summary dismissal. I very much hope it will not be necessary to use these powers. I hope, as I say, that wiser counsels will prevail and that the dialogue proceeding will continue. I can also assure all concerned that these powers will not be used in respect of anything that has happened so far, and they will not lightly be used in the future. I am glad to say in conclusion that a meeting was held between the Deputy Commissioner of Police and representatives of the various police associations during most of today. The meeting agreed that the Commissioner should issue a statement that will be made shortly, recording a pledge of full loyalty to the Commissioner and a pledge that in future all issues will be pursued through established constitutional channels and by no other means, and certainly not by the process of any protest public gatherings. As I have only just that honourable members should know of it before passing, but I feel it right that honourable members should know of it before passing the bill before them. I still think that the powers that the amendment will confer are desirable, though the outcome of this meeting does offer additional hope that they will not need to be used. Thank you.